The night before our wedding, my fiancé revealed a secret that destroyed our future. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. The night before our wedding, I sat in my hotel room, going over every detail of the ceremony in my head. Everything was perfect: flowers, venue, vows. I couldn't wait to see Emily walk down that aisle in her dress, the one we picked out together, her eyes filled with the same love that had carried us through the last 3 years. But then, a text came in. I didn't recognize the number at first, and when I opened the message, it was just a single sentence: "I need to talk to you before tomorrow." Attached was a photo, a blurry image of Emily and another man, their faces close, far too intimate. My heart dropped into my stomach. It had to be a mistake, I told myself. Someone playing a cruel prank. I stared at the picture, trying to convince myself it wasn't what it looked like. But deep down, I knew. I called her immediately, my hands shaking as I dialed her number. It rang once, twice, then she picked up. "Hey, babe," Emily's voice came through, light and cheerful, as if everything was normal. I couldn't hold back. "Who is he, Emily?" Silence. For a moment, I thought the call had dropped. But then, her voice came back, lower now, filled with guilt. "Jason. I was going to tell you. I didn't mean for it to happen." My world was spinning. "What do you mean, you didn't mean for it to happen? Who is he?" She didn't answer right away. When she did, her words were hesitant, as if she was trying to soften the blow. "It was a mistake. Someone I met at work. It wasn't supposed to be serious." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "A mistake? Emily, we're getting married tomorrow." "I know," she said, her voice cracking. "I'm so sorry, Jason. I didn't know how to tell you, and then things got out of hand." "Out of hand?" I felt sick. I stood up, pacing the room, trying to wrap my head around what she was saying. This wasn't happening. Not the night before our wedding. Not like this. "When did it happen?" I asked, my voice hard, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "Just a few weeks ago," she admitted. "I ended it, Jason, I swear. I love you, I want to marry you. It was a mistake, and I wish I could take it back." Weeks ago. While we were planning the wedding. While I was picking out our first dance song, she was with someone else. The betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut, knocking the wind out of me. "How could you do this?" I asked, my voice breaking. "How could you let it get this far and not say anything?" "I didn't want to hurt you," she said, her voice shaking now, tears evident on the other end of the line. "I love you, Jason. I don't want to lose you." But she had already lost me, whether she knew it or not. The woman I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with had betrayed me in the worst way possible, and on the eve of our wedding, she had waited until it was too late to come clean. I hung up without another word. For the rest of the night, I sat in that hotel room, staring at the wall, trying to make sense of everything. My phone buzzed again and again, texts, missed calls, all from Emily. But I couldn't bring myself to respond. My mind was blank, and my heart felt shattered. The hours dragged on, and as dawn approached, I realized I had a decision to make. I could go through with the wedding, pretend like nothing had happened, or I could walk away from everything I thought I wanted. I didn't know what I was going to do. All I knew was that nothing would ever be the same. The morning sun crept into the hotel room, casting long shadows across the floor. I hadn't slept. My mind had been racing all night, replaying every moment with Emily, our first date, the proposal, the months we spent planning this wedding. And now, the revelation that had shattered it all. I stared at the suit hanging in the closet, the one I had been so excited to wear today. I couldn't bring myself to put it on. How was I supposed to stand in front of everyone, pretending everything was fine, when my world had just been ripped apart? There was a knock on the door. For a moment, I thought it might be Emily, but when I opened it, I found my best man, David, standing there. He was dressed and ready, looking every bit the part of someone who was about to witness his best friend's wedding. "Hey, man," he said, smiling, but his grin faded when he saw my face. "What's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost." I motioned for him to come in, closing the door behind him. I hadn't told anyone yet, hadn't even figured out how to say the words out loud. But now, looking at David, I knew I couldn't keep it in any longer. "She cheated on me," I blurted out, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. David's eyes widened in shock. "What? Emily? When did you find out?" "Last night," I said, sinking onto the edge of the bed. "She called me. Said it was a mistake, something that happened a few weeks ago." "Jesus, man." David sat down next to me, running a hand through his hair. "What are you going to do?" I shook my head, my thoughts still a mess. "I don't know. I can't believe this is happening. We're supposed to be getting married in a few hours." David sat in silence for a moment, then placed a hand on my shoulder. "Look, I know this is a lot to take in, but you need to think about what's best for you. Don't do anything just because you feel like you have to. I thought we were happy, I said, my voice cracking. How could she do this? David sighed. People make mistakes, man. But this? This is something you have to figure out if you can forgive. Forgive. The word hung in the air like a challenge, one I wasn't sure I could rise to. Could I really walk down that aisle, knowing what I now knew? Knowing that she had betrayed me in the most personal way possible? I need to talk to her, I muttered, standing up abruptly. David nodded. Do what you need to do, but remember, you don't owe her anything today. You deserve better than to go into this with doubts. I nodded, but the pit in my stomach only grew as I left the room, heading down the hall to where Emily was staying. My heart pounded in my chest with each step, unsure of what I would say, or how I would even look her in the eyes. When I reached her door, I hesitated for a moment, my hand hovering just above the wood. Then, with a deep breath, I knocked. It took a few seconds, but the door opened, revealing Emily. Her eyes were red and swollen, her face pale. She had been crying all night, just like me. Seeing her like that hurt more than I expected, but it didn't erase the betrayal. Jason, she whispered, stepping aside to let me in. I walked in, the silence between us thick with tension. Neither of us spoke for a moment, the weight of what needed to be said hanging in the air. I'm sorry, she said softly, breaking the silence. I never meant for this to happen. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked, my voice low but steady. Emily swallowed hard, looking down at the floor. I didn't want to ruin what we have. I was scared that if I told you, you'd leave me. I let out a bitter laugh. And how's that working out for you now? Her eyes filled with fresh tears, but I didn't feel any sympathy. Not anymore. I love you, Jason, she said, her voice cracking. I made a mistake, but it doesn't change how I feel about you. I still want to marry you. I still want us. I stared at her, searching for the person I had fallen in love with. But all I could see was someone who had broken my trust, someone who had kept a secret that could have destroyed us. I don't know if I can do this, Emily, I said finally, the words heavy in my chest. Please, she whispered, stepping closer. Don't throw it all away because of one mistake. I took a step back, shaking my head. It's not just one mistake, Emily. It's a betrayal. And it's not something I can just forget. The room fell silent again, and for the first time, I realized that this was the moment I had to make a choice. The wedding was hours away, but I wasn't sure I could go through with it. I stood in the hallway for what felt like an eternity after leaving Emily's room. The weight of her tears, her apologies, and the memories of our relationship bore down on me like a heavy fog. Each step away from her felt like I was moving closer to an abyss, one where I would either be alone or worse, stuck in a life where I was constantly doubting everything. David was right, this was a choice I had to make for myself. But how was I supposed to make a decision like this, hours before the wedding, with everything I thought I knew about Emily suddenly unraveling? I wandered down to the hotel's small garden, seeking some clarity. The wedding was set to take place in a few hours, and guests would be arriving soon. I could already picture the smiling faces of friends and family, the perfectly arranged flowers, the music that would play as Emily walked down the aisle. But now, all of it felt like a cruel mockery of what was supposed to be our happiest day. I sat down on one of the stone benches, my head in my hands. Could I really forgive her? Could I walk down that aisle, say my vows, and spend my life with someone who had kept this secret from me? My phone buzzed in my pocket, jolting me from my thoughts. I pulled it out to see a message from my mom. Mom, just checked in at the hotel. Can't wait to see you both, love you. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. My family was here. Her family was here. Everyone was expecting a wedding, not the unraveling of everything we had built together. I typed out a quick response, telling her I'd see her soon, but even as I sent it, the reality of the situation was crashing down on me. How was I supposed to tell them? I was still deep in thought when I heard footsteps approaching. I looked up and saw David walking toward me, his face etched with concern. He sat down next to me without a word, waiting for me to speak first. I talked to her, I finally said, my voice hoarse. And? David asked cautiously. She wants to go through with the wedding, I said bitterly, rubbing my hands together to stop them from shaking. She says it was a mistake. She says she loves me. David exhaled, glancing up at the sky before turning back to me. Do you believe her? I shrugged. I don't know. I don't know what to believe anymore. He paused for a moment, then leaned forward. Look, man, this is your life. No one else can tell you what to do. But I'll say this, if you're not sure, don't force yourself into something you're going to regret. You deserve more than that. I nodded, though the words weren't offering the comfort I had hoped for. I knew he was right, but the fear of making the wrong decision gnawed at me. What if I walked away and regretted it? What if I stayed and it haunted me forever? What would you do? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. David was silent for a long moment, then he sighed. Honestly? I don't know. But I'd trust my gut. If there's doubt, if there's even a small part of you that questions whether you can trust her again, that's something you need to face before you say, I do. Trust. The one thing that had been broken in the blink of an eye. Could it ever be rebuilt? I'm just scared, I admitted, my voice breaking. I thought we were happy. I thought she was the one. And now? I don't even know who she is. David placed a hand on my shoulder. It's okay to be scared, man. But don't let fear make the decision for you. I nodded, but the knot in my stomach only tightened. There was no easy answer here. No matter what I chose, there would be consequences. The sound of music floating through the air pulled me from my thoughts. I glanced up to see hotel staff starting to prepare for the wedding, setting up chairs, adjusting decorations. The reality of the day was hitting me hard. I should go, I said, standing up. David rose with me. You going to be okay? I forced a smile. I don't know. But I need to talk to my family. I can't go through with this without telling them the truth. He nodded, giving me a supportive pat on the back. Whatever happens, I've got your back. I headed inside, my steps heavy as I made my way toward my parents' room. My mind was spinning, and the closer I got to their door, the more my stomach churned. How was I supposed to break this news to them? How would they react? When I knocked, my mom answered with her usual bright smile, but it faltered when she saw the look on my face. Jason, what's wrong? She asked, immediately ushering me inside. My dad was sitting on the couch, looking up from his phone as I entered. You look like you've seen a ghost, he remarked, setting his phone down. I took a deep breath, sitting down across from them. This was it. I couldn't hide the truth any longer. Mom, Dad, I started, my voice shaky. There's something you need to know. The words stuck in my throat as I sat in front of my parents, their concerned eyes fixed on me. I had always been close with them, but this was something I had never prepared myself for. How do you tell your parents that the woman they were about to welcome into the family had betrayed their son? My mom reached out, placing a hand on mine. Jason, sweetheart, whatever it is, we're here for you. Just tell us what's going on. I swallowed hard, staring at the floor, unable to meet their gaze. Emily, she cheated on me. The room went still, the silence pressing in around us. My mom's hand tightened around mine, while my dad sat up straighter, his face hardening with disbelief. What do you mean? My dad finally asked, his voice low but firm. When did this happen? Not long ago, I muttered, still avoiding their eyes. A few weeks ago, apparently. She told me last night. My mom's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. Oh, Jason. I couldn't look at her. The pain in her voice was a reflection of my own, and I didn't know how to handle it. My dad, on the other hand, stood up abruptly, pacing the room. You're telling me this now? On your wedding day? What the hell are we supposed to do? I don't know, I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. I don't know what I'm supposed to do either. You can't marry her, my dad said firmly, his voice leaving no room for argument. You can't stand up there and make vows to someone who's already broken them. I know, I said, running a hand through my hair in frustration. But it's not that simple. How is it not simple? He shot back, his anger rising. She cheated on you, Jason. That's the end of it. My mom stood up, placing a hand on his arm to calm him. Frank, let him think this through. It's a lot to process. But my dad wasn't having it. No, Mary, this is a black and white situation. She betrayed him, and there's no coming back from that. I sat in silence, letting their words wash over me. Part of me agreed with my dad. How could I marry someone who had already broken my trust? But another part of me was still clinging to the life Emily and I had planned together. I loved her. And she said she loved me. Wasn't love supposed to be stronger than mistakes? Jason, my mom said softly, pulling me out of my thoughts. What do you want to do? I met her gaze for the first time since entering the room, and I saw the worry etched on her face. She wasn't angry like my dad. She was hurt, for me, for everything I was going through. I don't know, I whispered, my voice cracking. I really don't know. My dad exhaled sharply, clearly frustrated, but he softened his tone. Look, son, I know this is hard. But you need to make a decision, and you need to make it fast. You can't drag this out. Not with the wedding so close. I know, I muttered. I need some time. There's not much time left, my dad reminded me. My mom knelt in front of me, taking my hands in hers. Jason, whatever you decide, we're here for you. We'll support you no matter what. But you need to do what's best for you. Don't think about the wedding, or the guests, or anyone else. This is your life. Her words hit me hard, and for the first time since this whole ordeal started, I felt a tiny bit of clarity. She was right. This wasn't about the wedding, or the guests, or even Emily. This was about me, about what I could live with. And right now, I didn't know if I could live with marrying her. I think I need to call it off, I finally said, the words hanging heavy in the air. My dad let out a sigh of relief, but my mom's face crumpled, not in disagreement, but in sadness for what could have been. Are you sure? She asked gently, though I could tell she already knew the answer. I nodded slowly. I can't marry her. Not after this. My dad stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder. You're making the right choice, son. But his reassurance didn't make it any easier. My stomach was in knots, and my heart felt like it was being ripped apart. This wasn't how today was supposed to go. I was supposed to be getting ready to marry the love of my life, not unraveling everything I thought we had. I'll take care of the guests, my dad said, already moving into action. We'll let everyone know the wedding's off. The reality of what was happening hit me like a freight train. I wasn't just calling off the wedding, I was ending everything. The life Emily and I had planned, the future I had dreamed of, it was all crashing down around me. I need to talk to her, I said suddenly, standing up. My parents looked at me with surprise, but I didn't wait for them to say anything. I needed to speak to Emily one last time before everything ended. I walked back down the hallway toward her room, my heart pounding in my chest. My mind raced with what I was going to say, but no words came to me. How do you end a relationship that was supposed to last a lifetime? When I reached her door, I hesitated for a moment, but then I knocked. After a few seconds, the door opened, and there she was, Emily, standing there with tear-streaked cheeks and red, swollen eyes. Jason, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I stepped inside, the door closing softly behind me. The air between us was thick with tension, but there was no more time for silence. We need to talk, I said, my voice firmer than I expected. She nodded, her eyes wide with fear. I know. The room was quiet as Emily and I stood facing each other. The air felt heavy, as though every unsaid word between us was weighing it down. I could see the guilt written all over her face, her tear-streaked eyes pleading with me for understanding, for forgiveness, for something I wasn't sure I could give. I'm calling off the wedding, I said, my voice steady but hollow. The words felt final, like they were closing the door on the life we had been planning for so long. Emily's face crumpled as she let out a soft sob. Please, Jason, don't. I'm begging you. I know I hurt you, but I love you. I made a mistake, a horrible mistake, but it was never because I didn't care about you. I can't marry you, Emily, I repeated, my voice firmer this time. You cheated on me. You broke my trust. And trust is everything in a marriage. Without it, what do we have? She shook her head, stepping closer to me, her hands trembling as she reached out for mine. I was scared, she said, her voice breaking. I don't know why I did it, but it wasn't about him, it was about me. I felt lost, confused, and I made the worst decision of my life. But please, Jason, don't throw us away because of one mistake. I pulled my hands away from hers, the contact feeling too much to bear. Her touch, once comforting and familiar, now felt foreign, like I was touching a stranger. One mistake? I said, my voice rising slightly with the emotion I had been holding back. This wasn't just one mistake, Emily. This was a betrayal. You were supposed to be my partner, the person I could trust more than anyone. And now I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust you again. Her eyes filled with tears again, and she wiped them away furiously. I'll do anything to make it up to you, she whispered. Anything. I'll spend the rest of my life proving to you that I can be the wife you deserve. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that she could fix this, that somehow we could move past the pain and rebuild what we had. But deep down, I knew that wasn't possible. The damage had been done, and it was irreparable. I don't want to live the rest of my life wondering if I can trust you, I said quietly. I can't live like that. Emily let out another sob, covering her face with her hands as she crumbled in front of me. Seeing her like this hurt, more than I thought it would. I didn't hate her, I wasn't even sure if I was angry anymore. I just felt empty. I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered through her tears. I love you, Jason. I love you so much. I know, I said softly. But love isn't enough. The silence between us stretched out, thick and suffocating. There was nothing more to say. We both knew it was over, even if neither of us wanted to admit it out loud. After a long moment, I finally spoke again, my voice low and resigned. I'm going to go. My dad will let everyone know the wedding's off. She nodded, her shoulders shaking with sobs, but she didn't try to stop me this time. I turned and walked to the door, my heart heavy with the weight of what was happening. As I reached for the doorknob, I hesitated for a moment, turning back to look at her one last time. The woman I had once thought I would spend my life with was now a stranger to me, and the future I had envisioned was slipping through my fingers like sand. I hope you find peace, Emily, I said softly, and then I walked out of the room. The rest of the day passed in a blur. My dad handled the cancellation of the wedding, while my mom stayed by my side, offering quiet comfort. Guests were confused, some were disappointed, but most were supportive when they heard the truth. I didn't have the energy to explain the details to anyone. I just wanted to disappear, to find a way to make sense of everything that had happened. That night, I sat alone in the empty hotel room that was supposed to be our honeymoon suite. The silence was deafening, and the emptiness of the room mirrored the emptiness I felt inside. I stared at the wedding suit hanging on the door, the one I would never wear, and I realized just how much my life had changed in the span of a single day. I thought about Emily, about the life we had planned, the future we would never have. I thought about the love we had shared, the moments of joy that now felt tainted by her betrayal. And I thought about the future, the uncertain path that lay ahead of me now. There was a knock on the door, and for a brief moment, I wondered if it was her. But when I opened it, I found David standing there, a bottle of whiskey in his hand. "Figured you could use this," he said, holding it up. I managed a small, tired smile. "You figured right." We sat in silence for a while, passing the bottle back and forth. David didn't try to give me any advice or say anything profound. He just sat with me, letting me process the weight of everything in my own time. "You made the right call, man," he said quietly after a long stretch of silence. "I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but you did." I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I believed him. The pain was still too fresh, too raw for me to see any kind of silver lining. But I knew he was probably right. I had to believe that I had made the right choice, even if it hurt like hell. As the night wore on, the numbness began to settle in, dulling the sharp edges of my pain. I knew the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. There would be moments of doubt, of sadness, of wondering if I had made the wrong decision. But deep down, I also knew that I couldn't live with the weight of her betrayal hanging over me forever. In the end, trust was the foundation of everything. And without it, there was nothing left to build on. The morning light streamed through the window of the hotel room, casting a soft glow over the empty space. I hadn't slept much the night before, my mind racing with everything that had happened. The weight of calling off the wedding still pressed heavily on me, but there was a strange sense of calm that had settled in too, like the storm had finally passed. David had left sometime after midnight, the whiskey bottle now sitting empty on the floor beside the bed. He didn't say much before he left, just patted me on the shoulder, told me to take care of myself, and headed out. He'd been my best friend for years, and he knew when words weren't enough. I sat up in bed, the silence of the room deafening. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, and I glanced at the screen. It was a message from my mom, checking in to see how I was doing. I couldn't bring myself to answer just yet. I needed some time to process before I talked to anyone. My thoughts drifted back to Emily. I wondered how she was doing, if she was still in the hotel or if she had already left. Part of me wanted to reach out to her, to hear her voice one last time. But another part of me knew that there was nothing more to say. The decision had been made. The life we had planned together was over. I got up and walked to the window, staring out at the city below. People were going about their lives, unaware of the chaos that had unfolded in mine. I felt strangely detached from it all, like I was watching the world from a distance. As I stood there, I realized something important. I wasn't broken. Yes, I was hurt. Yes, I was devastated by what had happened. But I wasn't destroyed. I was still here, still standing. And that was something. There was a knock on the door, and I turned, my heart skipping a beat. For a brief moment, I thought it might be Emily, but when I opened the door, it was my mom. She stood there, her face full of concern, but also relief when she saw me. "Hi, sweetheart," she said softly, stepping inside. "Hey, Mom," I replied, my voice tired but steady. She sat down on the edge of the bed, patting the spot next to her. I sat down beside her, feeling the familiar warmth of her presence. "How are you holding up?" she asked gently, her eyes searching mine for the truth. "I'm okay," I said after a moment. "I mean, it's hard, but I think I made the right decision." She nodded, her hand resting on my shoulder. "You did. I know it was a difficult choice, but sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that make the most sense." "I just can't believe it's over," I said quietly, my eyes dropping to the floor. "I thought we had everything figured out. I thought we'd be spending the rest of our lives together." "I know," she whispered, pulling me into a gentle hug. "But you deserve someone who's fully committed to you, Jason. Someone who will love and respect you the way you deserve. This wasn't your fault." I let out a deep breath, the tightness in my chest easing just a little. She was right. I wasn't to blame for what had happened. Emily's betrayal was her own choice, and it didn't define my worth. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now," I admitted, the uncertainty of the future weighing heavily on me. "Take it one day at a time," my mom said, her voice full of quiet wisdom. "You don't have to figure everything out right now. Just focus on healing, on finding yourself again. The rest will come in time. I nodded, feeling a small flicker of hope. Maybe she was right. Maybe this was the beginning of something new, something different. It wasn't the future I had planned, but that didn't mean it couldn't still be a good one. We sat in silence for a while, my mom's presence comforting me in a way that words never could. She didn't push me to talk more, didn't try to offer solutions. She just sat with me, letting me be. After a while, I stood up and walked to the window again, staring out at the city once more. The sun was higher in the sky now, and the day felt new, full of possibilities. I think I'm going to be okay, I said, more to myself than to her. But it felt true, even if I wasn't entirely sure of it yet. My mom smiled softly. You will be, Jason. It'll take time, but you're strong. You'll get through this. As I stood there, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The pain was still there, of course, but it wasn't as sharp. It was like the beginning of a scar, something that would always be a part of me, but wouldn't define me. Emily would always be a part of my story, but she wouldn't be the whole story. There was more to me than this heartbreak, more to my life than what had happened over the past few days. I turned back to my mom, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I smiled. It was small, tentative, but it was real. Thank you, I said quietly. She stood up, hugging me tightly. Always, sweetheart. Later that afternoon, I packed up my things and left the hotel. I didn't look back as I walked through the lobby, the remnants of what was supposed to be my wedding day fading behind me. I wasn't sure where I was headed next, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the unknown. Life didn't always go the way we planned. Sometimes, it took detours that we never saw coming. But those detours could lead us to places we never imagined. And as I drove away from the hotel, I couldn't help but feel that maybe, just maybe, something better was waiting for me on the other side of this heartache.